Hi, everyone. This is Kovid back with another episode, another session of the Hows and Whats of DORA. Last time we had set the stage with Mario and Joan talking about how to implement engineering metrics with some real practical examples that we brought in. We are going to take that momentum further with them today. Let me just quickly recap a little bit of the last session. So we ended our session talking about how to bring more predictability to the projects, and Mario and John were really excited to talk about their approach, which is Monte Carlo. But we couldn't cover a lot last time, so this time we thought like dedicate a session to that and bring more predictability to your software development projects. I am thrilled to welcome again Mario and Joan. Mario, congratulations. Last time when we met, you were a senior engineering manager, and you have been promoted to director of engineering at ContentSquare. So many congratulations. And then we have Joan, who is engineering manager at New Relic. So welcome both of you. I'll give you a moment to say hi to the audience once again. Go ahead, Mario.
Hello, everybody. I'm super happy to be here for the fourth time. I hope that these stories and the experiences that we share today are to your liking. And feel free to drop comments, to leave questions in the chat so that we can address them during this session or the next one.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you. And thank you for mentioning to drop in the Q&A, because I usually forget to tell the audience. So great. I mean, last two sessions we are together. You're almost there, taking up my position also.
Promotion.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Joan, over to you.
No, well, thank you to having us again here, Kovid, so we can continue with our conversation that we had last time. It's my second time here and happy to be here again. I think that the first time it was interesting what we were saying. I hope that the second time it's also keeping interesting. I hope.
Definitely. Before we jump on to Monte Carlo and talk more about how to bring predictability with these engineering metrics, there was one thing that I wanted to share with the audience and with you guys. So I was talking to few engineering managers on Reddit, and I asked them like, what topics should we cover on this webinar? We are doing this kind of a webinar where we talk about practical applications of engineering metrics. So there was one good, interesting comments. I mean, a lot of people gave their suggestions. I've added that to today's episode. Like today, after Monte Carlo, if we are able to cover a few topics, I've added those. But one thing that really struck out in those comments was one of the person mentioned that why do bring this engineering metrics, why to bring that over micromanagement where we really don't need anything. It's pretty simple. Sprints are there. We are able to look at a few metrics by ourselves. Then why to overemphasize on it? Why to really bring it on? And it's not the first time I have encountered this, to be honest, but I really wanted to understand your perspective, both of your perspective on this. Like when you guys went out implementing certain things, was there similar kind of a friction in the team from the management? And how did you go about it? And what's your opinion about this thought?
You want to go first, John?
Well, come, I can be first. And I think one of the first things that you have to take into account is not being hijacked, right, by the metrics. So like you are blindly focusing on improving a set of metrics because they are a trend right now. I think this is kind of the more complex thing. And if people usually, from my point of view, my experience is when people is complaining about a set of things that you think is for the best of the team and are gonna help the team to be a better team. If people are complaining about that, is this kind of friction is because people usually is against being change, not the change per se. I mean, if you are pushing a change and you are not explaining them why you do you think, or they are not part of this decision, for me is when there is this kind of friction, and because you're trying to push for something that it's nonsense for them, because maybe you take the lead without taking into account their decision or their point of view. So I think this is kind of sometimes because we are focusing too much on metrics, and we are not taking too much into account and why we are doing that, the team, situation, if the metrics that we have already good enough, why we are adding more things, maybe we're adding too many things. So for me,
Yeah,
usually this is kind of thing, the rationale behind this kind of complaints or situation tensions, because it's different in different situations.
totally agree. And I think what you mean is like deep down, you also believe that this is a good thing to do, but there is a balance that we need to strike. It should be done in the right way. Right things should be brought in, and the team should be aligned on those particular things that we are measuring, that we are doing. And yes, I think that that's a fundamental truth, that change is not comfortable for people. So unless you tie motivation and incentivization with those changes and what they could achieve as outcome after that change comes in, uh, people would be more aligned. I totally agree to that.
I guess that we are already, I mean, you're changing all the time. But if people is pushing for the change, then sometimes could be uncomfortable.
Yeah, makes sense. There has to be a purpose.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right, Mario, what's your take?
Yes, I like what John said. I agree with it as well. Would like to expand a bit on something that we also covered in the very first sessions that we recorded together. I think we have to get people to agree that some of these metrics can be very good indicators of perception from the point of view of the customer, right? So we have to agree that, and there's different ways to do it. We went on detail during the first podcast, but once we do that, once we agree that, for example, customers interested in how quickly can we ship something to them, or whether they experience incidents in production and that increases their frustration, the next step to do is to ask the team that is the team to which we are inviting to start using metrics. What are the indicators that they think represent the work that they do, and why, if they think otherwise, are these not metrics that they should be responsible for? And to me, this is the key to starting the conversation, that they agree that cycle time, for example, is something that is directly perceived by the customer, and we, as the way we work, are responsible for longer or shorter cycle times, like we're responsible for quality and many other things. And then if we're responsible, it might be smart to measure it. It might be smart to add some observation that, again, is within boundaries, so that we have more information to make better decisions and to understand really, are we doing well as we think we are, or are we not?
Makes sense. I think what you just said brought in more clarity on what John mentioned. I think the purpose has to be associated, and that purpose has to be explained. The example which you gave about cycle time, let's say, for example, should be known to the developers, to the team, that why it is important for them to measure and how they are accountable for it. So that totally makes sense. One thing that came to my mind when I was reading the comment, so this guy is basically, I think, a senior engineering manager or a director who said this, and I felt somewhere, is there a fear like engineering for business folks runs like a little bit of a black box, because people are not aware of technicalities, the complexity, the code, how architecture works, what goes into it. So do you think, is this also a reason, like the fear of making things transparent, like metrics would bring reality in front of the business execs or the leaders, and that can create a little bit of a problem and people hesitate to bring it in? Can that be also a reason?
It could be, but it would be very wrong. It would be very wrong if that is a reason which we use to shield ourselves with, right? I can understand the fear. As soon as you start looking into, I think it was called the black box, right? There was a post from John Cutler, right? You see all these things, and suddenly you might understand that not everything that occurs is solely the team's responsibility. And by the way, when you introduce this to the team, of course, the team is directly responsible, but there are many things that happen in the organization that are indirectly responsible for this. So teams don't live in a vacuum. As John likes to say, a team is a complex system, and companies, organizations are a complex system of complex systems, and optimizing for a local optimum is not, it's only going to take you so far. So it's important that people see this, even if it makes people feel uncomfortable, both within and outside the team, so that we can take action together, because only the actions that are transversal for the whole organization can really have long-lasting effects and larger impacts.
Makes sense. John, do you have anything to say here?
I agree with Mario, with what Mario was saying. I don't think, I mean, maybe is this the case that maybe people don't want to show their data. It could be, but I don't think that make any sense, to be honest, because it's a complex process, all this software development, I understand. But I mean, the more that I see, or the more I dive into the data of each of the teams, as Mari was saying, I mean, at the end, we are all connected with different parts of the company, and engineering is one of the parts. There's a lot of other things. So it's complex. There's a lot of data, but I don't know. There's more things to improve also in different parts of the company. And showing your data is the best thing that you can do, because you can share how good you are in one part, and you can also share how bad you are in one part, so you can improve, meaning that all the company can get advantage of that if you improve that. I don't know.
Totally.
It could be, but from my point of view, transparency is key in this kind of situation. So showing my data, for me, it's the best that I can do.
Yeah. Let's just say that it's very easy to show great data and be transparent when the data is something that makes you feel proud. It's way harder to do it when it shows that it needs improvement.
That's true. All right. I think with that, I feel there needs to be a purpose to do things. And of course, if people remain transparent, we can bring that culture of having the right balance of metrics, empathy, understanding, and then actually move towards progress. Having said that, I think bringing an approach to bring more predictability everyone wants. Like, forget for a while metrics, but every project manager, every engineering manager can relate to this situation where they are trying to give the timelines and almost every time failing to meet those deadlines what they give. So it's a repeated problem, heard a lot. And today I think we have a new approach, not exactly a new approach, but coming from people. We are going to talk about it on this webinar, which is Monte Carlo. So Mario, I think would you like to take the lead and talk more about, give some introduction about this approach, how it helps engineering teams bring more predictability to their work?
Oh yes, with pleasure. This is one of my favorite topics.
I think you were just waiting for it.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
So what this method does is it tries to forecast the future based on the historical data. And the beauty of it is that everybody has this available. Unlike other methodologies that perhaps require a specific investment of time, this is something that you have already historical data to build up with. And if you think about it, it's that simple. It doesn't even require any mathematical complex calculations. So let's imagine that you are tracking all the throughput, so all the things that you deliver day by day or week by week. And you can see that some days you ship 1 or 2 things, other days you ship 0, some days you ship 5, etc., etc. So with this window of information, which we can say it's, I don't know, you can start with 2 weeks. Any data is better than no data. But let's say you have 2 to 4 weeks of data. And if you aggregate that, you can see it in 2 ways. First, how much stuff you ship every day, or you can see you can see how the frequency in which you ship 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. So normally that will follow some time of long tail distribution. Imagine that somebody asks you, okay, you've been shipping for 2 to 4 weeks. When are you going to ship the next thing? And you have this information. What would everybody of us do? So you have a few choices. You can sample randomly from your throughput from the previous weeks, and it would not be super accurate, but also it's unlikely to be extremely wrong. You can also look at the long tail distribution, and you can say, okay, so the highest frequency of items delivered in all these weeks is 1. So I don't know, probability-wise, you can say 1, and you'll be more likely to be accurate than to be wrong. So this is how this works. Basically, looking at the past and knowing how much work you have to do, you sample your previous throughput and you sample large amount of times, and you overlap all these times to get an idea of when can things be done. And the beauty of it is that not only you have the historical data, is that it's database. It costs absolutely zero, and it's better than other forms of forecasting because it doesn't give you a single number. It doesn't say, oh, by this date I will have it, or it's going to take 2 weeks, it's going to take 3 weeks. You actually see the whole spectrum of probabilities, right? Because when you overlap all these multiple sampling, you see something like a bell-shaped curve, and you can see, oh, how likely am I going to ship this by the next week? Very unlikely, maybe 10%, 20% based on the historical data. How likely am I to ship this in 2 weeks from now? Or maybe it goes to 50%. So you can take it all the as further as you need to, depending on the how much confidence do you want to have that you're shipping by that date, right? It's all based on probabilities. So this is how it works. Maybe I went a bit much in detail, but basically you sample historical data and you try to predict with this same sampling how likely are you going to delete X amount of number of tickets per day of work, and with that you can have a pretty accurate forecast. So far so good.
Yeah, so far so good. But I have a few questions running in my mind.
Right.
John, do you want to add something, or shall I ask my question?
Go, shoot, Kovid.
Okay. So, Mario, you mentioned about first thing, looking at the throughput of, let's say, last 4 weeks of data. So when you say throughput, I just want a more specific thing. Should I look at issues that we closed, or should we look at the deployment frequency, or should we look at maybe just PRs getting much? What should I look at? Because what I feel when we need to give some estimations, sometimes as the engineering manager asking a team lead that, okay, can you do this piece of work in so and so time or not? And then team lead is going back, checking what needs to be done, and then giving an estimate. So what is that particular metric when we are analyzing last data in terms of throughput that we should be looking at?
Okay, well, very good question. So if I had a team starting new with this, I would take all data, right? So you can do this at multiple levels. Your bottom level, so the more granular level, is at the team level, and we're looking at tasks, bugs, stories, issues. You can call it whatever, but it's quite granular. You can also take it a step further and look at features, at epics. You can take it all the way further to strategic initiatives that take quarters or years. So let's focus with the team that is starting with this. So get all the data that you can, because at the beginning you actually want to have a bit more critical mass of data. So it helps to look at everything. When we talk about throughput, what we're talking about is any piece of work that was completed. Completed is something that the team should define. But do note that the type of work, the nature of work a team does can be different. So not all the work is coding work. Not all coding work ends up in production. Well, maybe yes. But you do all the type of work, right? So you do bug fixing, you do support, you answer questions, you have some conceptions to do, right? So there is a lot of work also that is not strictly coding work. And this forms part of the bunch of things of topics that a team spends time in. So why I'm saying take everything, because this is the reality today, or this has been the reality for the last 4 weeks. So if your team has dedicated 20% of their time to addressing questions, support to the customers, if a team has dedicated another 30% to do conception, to do discovery, to think about how they can tackle complex problems, or how to take part of the platform to the to next gen, all this is unlikely to change from time frame to time frame. It's this is one of the first issues that people who try to adopt this Monte Carlo forecast bring up. So they say, "Oh, but I cannot guarantee that my future work is going to be the same as my past work." And they are right. But what doesn't change, so maybe the specific work changes, but what doesn't change is the nature of the work and the distribution of the work, right? When does the nature of the distribution or the work or the type of work change? when you grab one team and you lift them, you shift them to a completely new scope and domain.
Right.
But how frequently does this occur? Or when you completely disband the team and bring 3 people and then take out 2 people, this can also change the nature of the work or invalidate a bit the throughput that you have. But even if this happens once, it's not going to happen every month or every 2 weeks, right? So after a while, you can say, my past distribution of probabilities is trustworthy. And even if it's not 100% trustworthy, it's better than anything else I have, because anything else is not based on data.
Yeah, makes sense. One more thing that just came as a thought while you were explaining the bell curve and talking about the probability. How is this model exactly eradicating the fact of recency? So, just to give you an example, in the last 1 week, there were more of planning, documentation, things like that were happening. People were discussing, brainstorming on how it needs to be built. And then there was 1 week where we had only coding, right? So when we are looking at data, we just need to make sure like all the aspects are covered, right? uh, because when I'm going to predict something, I need to know that in the next, let's say, 4 weeks or 6 weeks, when I'm giving the timeline, is the same event going to come into the picture or not? Like if planning would come into the picture or not, and it would change how the timelines are being given. If next 6 weeks I'm just coding, then the scenario would be different in terms of delivery. So I just wanted to like clarify, uh, would 4 weeks of data be sufficient to predict something, or I mean, how this model would eradicate that recency bias?
Yes, you can experiment. I don't think there is a one way to do it. But if I was starting with a new team, I would take as much data as I could initially.
Okay.
Then you could, after a while, let's say that things start to change in the team. For example, you have periods where you have more plannings, more conceptions, more discoveries, and periods that you have more percentage of the time implementing. You can choose to take a period which encompasses everything, as long as you think that future periods would be similar. I think there is no reason to believe otherwise, because a healthy team, I think it should be doing a bit of everything, unless you have some dysfunctions inside that when you look at the black box, right, and you're trying to surface them, they will come up, and then you have to maybe you have to take specific actions for that. But normally you want to take a larger period that encompasses everything. But the sampling works anyway. So you could take even a week. If I don't know, there's teams that do sprints that take 1 week. That should be perfectly valuable. Now, before taking it a step further, because there is after you start with a team measuring this, there's many other things that you can do. You can try. There is one more thing that is important, and that is we talk about work of different natures, like planning, conception, etc. But when you start looking at this, they should not really matter, right? So unless all the conceptions that you do, to put an example, take always above 2 weeks, and all the implementation and development work take around 1 or 2 days. If that is your case, perhaps you want to look at that first, because it is strange that we're in a situation where coding work is sliced in a way and pushed in a way that it flows through the system very fast, and conception work, again, just to put an example, but it could be support, it could be any other thing, it does not flow through the system, or it's not sliced in a way that allows it to move faster. So this is the first thing I would look like. Why? Again, just to have more higher resolution, because I have more data to use Monte Carlo. Then after does this make sense so far?
Yeah, totally. It makes sense.
Okay, Joan, I see like you want to you want to
No, I think no. I can just expand on what you were saying, Mario, because I think it's a very valid question what Kovid said, and as Mario was saying, is kind of if you are starting with that, maybe you need a small sample of data. That's fine to start. The only thing that it matters here is maybe is the accuracy. The accuracy, maybe it's not very high, but maybe it's good enough for now as a beginning. You don't have a lot of data, but you're starting, so you have to enjoy the process as well. You don't have to suffer it, because if you start collecting a lot of data, you maybe get a bit overwhelmed of all this data. And at the beginning, collecting just 4 weeks of your data, a month, 2 months, something like that, you can already have a lot of data. You can already have triggered a lot of discussions. And Mario was saying this kind of probabilistic forecast, you might start seeing things like, oh, it seems that we're taking longer than before. How is it? That's interesting. But what you said, Kovid, also the part of that, you at the beginning, maybe you are not sure about the nature of your work.
Yeah.
But as a thing that when Mary we were working together, I remember that we were also taking into account summer, because there's a lot of holidays there. So we usually is like, don't take the sample on summer for this prediction, because there's no summer here. But maybe when we were close to August and all this stuff, that more people were on holidays, we were like, okay, take into account that we will get less throughput than before.
True.
And even we went even farther with that, because we have kind of a different stories or tickets or items related with product, and other ones more on the technical roadmap. So at some point we were just using one forecast for one and another forecast for the other one, because we know that the capacity was different. So little by little, we were, as I said, improving the methodology, being more comfortable with the nature of our work. So we increased the accuracy. But that's the only thing that changed, that we increased the accuracy when we were knowing more and more of our processes.
Makes sense. Totally. I think that's pretty good. Any other specific tip like this, like any data that we should consider, any data point we should not consider while evaluating for, let's say, timelines? Anything, like you just bring up the summer example, anything that comes to your mind?
I mean, summer holidays, I mean, I said summer, but it will depend on different countries and culture, etc. But when you know that there's a lot of holidays, or you know that you will decrease the throughput, take that into account, because there's something, as you said, maybe the planning moment, but be careful with that, because if the planning is something that it's happening maybe 1 week every month, just put it, because it's kind of an iterative thing that you have to take into account.
Makes sense. Sorry, yeah.
No, I was gonna say that also depends. Also, you can also take that for bugs. Maybe you can take bugs out, or because maybe they have another process. The stories related to product, maybe in one part. Maybe the more expedite things coming from very urgent thing. I think this is kind of a nice tips to have into account when you are doing that stuff, when you want to improve it or iterate it.
Makes sense. Yeah, Mario, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is where it gets more complicated. So I think the basics is some things everybody can start with, and it should already give you enough information. But there are ways to tune it, as Joan was saying. So one of them is being mindful of the period. In my experience, and I think this is applicable to most teams, periods of where all the team is off, like I don't know, Christmas season, of over a week, they do matter, and we should include them. Periods of less than a week, or where not all the team is off, normally don't end up matter that much. So, for example, I would when you have a team that's composed of 5 people, for example, and you have somebody that's going on a paid time off for 1 month, then you definitely want to take that into account. If you have your whole team off for 1 week, and your window for forecast is, for example, 1 month, you definitely want to take that off. If you have people on and off, different people on the team during this month, normally it's not that relevant. If you have people permanently leaving or joining the team, that's also where you might want to adjust. So most of the tools, they have a scaling factor that can account for this. So if your team is 5 people, you get a new joiner, perhaps you want to increase that from 100% to a bit more. So you don't want to add 20% more, because this new person will take a few days, maybe a week, to be fully operational and to ramp up in the scope. So you can play with that value. The second thing that we can do, and that is what Joan was mentioning, it's that pure throughput only tells you amount of work delivered, but we're not telling anybody what is this work, right? So and we use, by the way, use the forecast for two things. The first thing is I started with the first thing I started with was forecasting of when is work going to be delivered. But what Joan was explaining right now, and what I was mentioning about team people joining the team, leaving the team, holiday season, that is normally around capacity, right? Joan was mentioning throughput. So if you want to think to have an idea of how much work can this team pull in a month or in a quarter, you can use this, and it gives you an idea again of raw throughput, of raw work done. And the same thing happens when you try to forecast. You have raw amount of work that you could do, and you have an idea of when is that work likely to be done. But here is where it gets interesting, and what you were mentioning at the beginning, Kovid, the type of work that you do. A team that is mostly focused on the roadmap, they have very little bugs, almost no questions, no needs for support from the customers, the conceptions and all this work happens regularly, and it's just one small part of their the throughput. For that team, you will have a forecast that tells one story. For a team that is buried into support, into incidents, into a lot of questions, into members of the team shifting, you have a completely different story from the same forecast. So here is where you can start removing and adding filtering in and out the different work types. One of the basic things that I like to do is when we talk with stakeholders about projects delivered, we look at all the throughput, right? And the first thing we do with Joan is we remove all the throughput that is bug, that is support, that is production incidents. So anything that does not equal to work delivered towards the roadmap. Why? Because it's not fair. We cannot say, oh, we're pushing 20 work items per week, but it turns out that only 5 of those were roadmap. All the others are all the staff, right? So when you do this forecast, they look bad. So absolutely every team with which I've done this, you look at that the first day, and I think we told this story the other time, you say, what? 3 months to do this? That's not possible. I don't trust this tool. But this tool is just being honest with you, and just looking at your past and telling you, unless you have a magic wand and you've done drastic changes in the team, chances are that you're going to face exactly the same thing in the following months, and you're going to be frustrated. And you're frustrating all the people in the way.
True. Makes sense.
So you can take that as far and as deep as you want to, but normally I recommend don't go too deep, right? Because then you start playing
that would be
numbers game, and maybe for an accuracy of 5-10%, you end up spending more time, and you're not guaranteed to get this accuracy either. The real benefit here is that this is no longer opinionated or based on gut feeling or pressure. This is based on data.
purely based on data.
Data doesn't lie. And if you don't like the data, okay, do something about the data so that the new data comes better. But again, this is continuous improvement in the team. Don't fake the data like we do with, for example, estimations. It takes zero effort, right? So one of the things that regularly happen when you do other types of forecasts, like estimation, I mean, always comparing to that because it's fairly common in teams using most of the current methodologies, is that you're asked for an estimation while you are having the idea. You're asked for an estimation when you start preparing the project. You're asked for an estimation when you found out all the dependencies. You ask for an estimation once you're 1 week into the project. You're asking estimation the first time you miss the deadline, right? So you have to think, okay, how much did they do? How much is left? But is there any new? So how many times does the team sit together, right? Because your 5 points 3 weeks from now, they're no longer valid. They're no longer 5 points or whatever. Right. They were never 5 points to begin with, but that's a different story, right? So all this costs time. So every time the team meets to do this, it costs money to the company, and it brings zero value. The customer doesn't care about this. So you can say, oh no, we actually spent 3 hours this week because we sat together to do estimations, and the customer's like, why you tell me this? This does not add value to me. I don't care. You can do whatever you want to do, but I'm not paying for that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do something that is zero effort, zero cost. So we have database, zero cost. And the final one is it's much richer in information. Your estimation of a single date, chances are you're going to miss that. Look at how many 5-point tickets took in cycle time, and you'll be surprised. You'll see a probability distribution that doesn't look equal at all. So you're giving to the customers and to the stakeholder much more transparency, so that the people building roadmaps at a higher level, at the company level, can really understand what are the trade-offs and what are the risks of having multiple teams working towards common objectives based on all this spectrum of information. And this you don't get with anything else.
No, I think this makes it much more convincing for me, at least at this point, that things would be more predictable. Things would be more in shape. Of course, we can't be 100% correct, but this would be one of the most efficient ways to look at predicting, estimating your projects. One thing that I want to dive deeper and ask you, so that our audience really take away some actionable tips also from here. How to collect those throughput metrics? Like if we are talking about issues, if we are talking about, let's say, deployments, anything and everything that you end up collecting as data that you can think of, what would be the sources, how to collect them? Just a little bit on that part, so that they find it easy on the execution front as well.
By sources, I get that any whatever. Actually, I started as an example. I started with collecting post-its on the wall long time ago, right?
Okay.
When I said that kind of stuff, I'm getting old. But for me, the first thing is to collect the things that you've done, whatever tool that you're using.
Okay.
And also, if you want to increase the accuracy, as we were saying, maybe you can start having kind of a categorization for it, different types of work, because then you can understand that. And also the date when you are finishing the things, because you know the date. Also, you can put this seasonality on the stuff that you are finishing as well. With this, I mean, you have more than enough to start, to be honest, with these three things.
And most of the pointers that you're talking about can be like pulled in from tools like Jira.
Indeed.
Okay.
That could be. That could be. I mean, and it's kind of easy to take it from them. Any app like that collects the kind of information, you can take it from it.
Sure.
Yeah. You have that in Typo, right?
Yeah, we do. Like we actually go beyond Jira. We collect data from the CI/CD pipelines. We collect data from your incidents. So yeah, Git, Jira, CI/CD, all that collected. So I was just trying to understand, like, if there are multiple sources and people are pulling data from different sources, that's where I think Typo could also be helping them to collect that data and use that data to model for Monte Carlo.
But
so
that's also one interesting point that you said, that all this data that you can take. For me, it's important in a second iteration of the Monte Carlo, because that's a topic that maybe we won't have time to talk, because it's kind of kids as well. But it's the right size. But this is the elephant in the room. We haven't talked about the size of a of a item, let's say. But if you have this different data, I mean, one of the parts that I like of this kind of forecasting is that you create a model, and to be this model accurate, you also have to be in a good shape, meaning that your system is predictable as well. So all this data that you were saying, it's good to know in good shape you are. Are you in a good shape or not? I mean, your CI/CDs for a reason. They are your bottleneck. They are for whatever. They are struggling with some BRTs or something like that, or the PRs are not working. So with all these points, you can understand also if your system is in a good shape. The best shape they have, the more accurate it will be your forecast.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And I think we really need to touch this point, Joan. We do it quickly, because that's the second biggest issue that people bring up when we in our experience we have invited people to use Monte Carlo, and that is, oh, but then all tickets have to be the same size, or all work items collected have to be the same. That's not true. That's not true. John has an amazing example for that. You can tell your track story, John. But in essence, if today you have some pieces of work that are bigger, other that are medium size, other that are smaller, I'm just making this sizing up from my head. Again, the nature of your work is unlikely to change drastically. So chances are in the future, you're going to have similar size work. But even more, you can have some pieces of work taking hours to a few days, so 1 day, and you can have others taking 1 to 2 weeks. In the end, all this is very likely to even out, right? So you have your bell curve, you have the extremes. You should not worry that much about the extremes. So the extremes can even out. And with all the work that you're doing about continuous improvement, about things that, even if I'm saying do not focus on having all the work having the same size, the things that we do on continuous improvement, on focusing on cycle time, on slicing, on having single acceptance criteria, of having more pairing and teaming on work, on eliminating bottlenecks, wait times, etc., that narrows your bell curve. Therefore, it leads to having more accuracy, and indirectly to things to work that is more equally sized, or at least more bounded. But even if you have some extreme, you should not be worrying about them, because their probability is low. It won't change. The nature of the work won't change in future iterations, and they can even out with others that are smaller in size.
Makes sense. All right. I think with this, I think we have got a lot more clarity. One last thing, just I wanted to understand, like, how better your approach to predicting has become. I mean, not approach, how better your results are now when you predict projects in your teams. Like earlier, maybe you were following some basic approach, and when you brought this into picture, how much improvement did you see? And I am asking this question just so that the audience also understands that what's the impact of putting in effort on this kind of an interesting model.
I would say very accurate, very accurate. I have to confess that right now I'm not using it, but only because we have done all the other work around cycle time that already leads to that result. So we're in a point perhaps where stakeholders are not really that interested of when are you going to deliver something. They know that if they prioritize the right way, work is coming up, work is coming out. So they already have what they need to do. I know other teams that have adopted it, they've shared feedback last few weeks. Accuracy is scary, scary, right? And yeah, I think the days, so the seasons that I've used it the most, it has been to prevent risk or to prevent missing key deadlines. And for those, it was very easy to see way ahead of time that we were not going to hit the target. So last year, we had some very challenging projects with a lot of work in one of these recent teams that I work with. And so there was a lot of work that was identified, and already, let's say, more granular, so more actionable. And there was work that was not identified. So we had an idea, rough idea, but it was very, very far away to start working and caring about that. So as soon as we realized that, hey, looking at the current pace, at the current throughput, and imagining that we have a similar amount of work ahead of us, we're not going to hit the target. So that helped other teams jump in, a way of outsourcing internally, and hit the deadline in the end. But what we're trying to avoid with these methods is also what we see many times, right? So everything is going all right, no risk, we're going to hit the date. And then last week before that, oh, no panic, everything is red, we're not going to hit it. Right, so people are naturally hesitant, reluctant to show the bad metrics, right? And they normally try to say, no, everything is going all right. But in the end, it's not. These type of models can help us see that ahead of time and take action to prevent it.
Perfect. Guys, we have only 15 minutes left. We have Q&A to go ahead with. There are a few questions that I already see. I think we go to the Q&A now and maybe take the next session for the topics related to how map engineering metrics to business KPIs and how to improve processes with data. We'll cover those topics in the next session. I am hoping you both are not running away. We will be coming again in the next month also, talking about these. So let's go back to the Q&A because we have some questions here. Are we good?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, guys. Thank you. So we'll take a minute break and then we'll start with the Q&A. So we'll start with the Q&A. First question is from Saloni. So that's for you, Joan. How do you make sure metrics aren't just numbers for leadership, but actually help engineers improve their workflow?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that this is related to what we were saying before. Metrics should be they are not the end. They are kind of the mean, right? How you are moving to an improvement. So from my point of view is they have to know. I mean, you have to have this conversation with the team regarding what they would like to improve first. So then connect their motivations, their purpose, we were saying, with that metrics. If there's not this connection, they will be numbers, as we said. So numbers without any kind of feeling or meaning for them. So you have to create this connection. Otherwise, complicated.
All right. Mario, you want to add something here?
No. I think that's the core. Metrics should help the team feel proud.
Great. Thank you, John. I think I just wanted to add one more thing here. Like what I have seen while talking to our customers also, the leadership who is motivated towards looking at engineering metrics and numbers, they are usually motivated because they actually see how the business goals and these metrics can align. So I'm just adding to your point, John, here, that if the teams know that this is the metric which defines what work they are impacting, which metric they are impacting, and if that can be tied to the business goals, and let's say EMs or let's say the director of engineering are actually going and explaining those things, that X team improved Y metric, and that ties to the business KPI of, let's say, increasing revenue or reducing cost, right? So automatically things form a great binding there, and intrinsic motivation drives into the overall culture. So that's what I have seen. So Saloni, to answer your question, I think what John said, I just added to it from my example.
Agree. 100%. I mean, at the end is what we are saying. Adding some purpose and some feelings there in that numbers.
Totally. I think we can move on to the next question then. This is from Nisha. What's one metric outside of DORA that you personally swear by for understanding team performance? And she hasn't mentioned the name. So Mario, maybe you can take this one.
I have a couple, but I'm going to save one for another question. I think one that we can rely on is to see what is the percentage of time that work spent blocked or waiting. So if we track that, we can quickly understand from what we're handing out to the customer how much of the time to wait for it is a waste and that we should address. Remember, customer doesn't care if there is a dependency, and for us it's very important. They don't pay for that. So we should eliminate all these things.
Perfect. I think, John, any thoughts?
I was going to say age of the tasks that have been in progress. So this is also related more or less what Mario was saying. So to understand how much time things that at the end are connected, what we were saying before, the shape, if you're in a good shape or not, for me, it's a good indicator.
Makes sense. All right. Moving on. This question is from Vishal. What's the most common mistake you see in new engineering managers when they introduce metrics to their teams? Interesting. Yeah.
That's a good one. If Joanna can start.
John, go ahead, please.
I guess it's also related to what we were saying, that introducing a metric because it's trendy, because everybody is using. Let's put these metrics because people say that they are very useful. Let's follow this thing. This is tricky. Again, why? Because there's not a why after that, and there's not purpose. What you're trying to improve, for me, this is one reason, and the other one is adding too many metrics at the same time, because it's could be overwhelming, increase the cognitive load, a lot of metrics to pay attention. Somebody can say, hey, this is too much for me. I will continue doing what I'm doing. For me, was successful, so I don't care of metrics. For me, this is the two things that I'm seeing.
Great. Yeah, Mario.
Great examples. One more I can add is don't do them yourself. This is also connected to what John said earlier. You need to help the team see the value. If you do it just yourself, it's going to be just reinforcing the misconception it's management metrics and disconnect the team from them.
Perfect. Then we have a question from Anirudh. When a DORA metric like change failure rate starts to go up, where do you typically start your investigation? Team, process, testing, or something else? So I think very relevant. These metrics are the means to understand if something is going wrong, what's underlying, what's the root cause. That is something which we yet need to identify. So change failure rate, your deployments are failing. So in that case, what would you go about searching for first?
Mario, you should.
Okay. So the cheapest moment. So the moment a defect is the cheapest is the earliest we take it. We find it, right? So that can happen during the coding phase. So if something has slipped through coding, through reviews, through QA, through UAT, through pipelines, through all the things that we have, and it has blown up in production, we might start looking at any of these. I think it makes more sense to look at to start from the end of it. So to try to understand how these things. So what was missing? What gate led these changes slip into production and start there? But of course, we should not stop there. So just because they stop slipping doesn't mean that they're not called at the moment where they are more expensive to fix. So we should follow this process all the way until the coding phase. And I would also take one step in the other direction. Let's see how many customers were impacted by this, or how many customers discover this, because there's only one thing that is even more expensive than failure in production, and that is failure in production that the customer discovers before you.
Yeah, makes sense. Totally makes sense. I think perfect answer there. John, you want to add something?
I think that was clear, Mario. I mean, also we said that this is kind of a complex problem. So there's not a simple answer for that. But I agree with what Mario said. I mean, starting looking at that point and little by little.
Maybe one thing, if you want something concrete besides what we mentioned, is double check that projects or features do have a directly responsible individual, somebody that is owning them or driving them start to end. And if you don't have this role, or if this is not part of how the team behaves with the work they do, this is another thing that can be worked on transversally.
Cool. Thank you. And one last question that we'll take now. This is from Nitesh. Yeah. As an engineering leader, I want to know, how is my team doing? What metrics should I look at? I think we have already covered this in a way. So I'll jump on to the next one. This is from an unknown user anyway. If a developer would like to understand where they are excelling and the areas for continued growth, what metrics should they focus on? Okay. I think Mario, we have kind of little bit covered it earlier also in the previous session, but if you want to take this.
Sure. So my advice to this developer is, do not look at individual metrics. So metric for individual, look at the metrics for teams, and look at the metrics for teams that the team is struggling with, and think about what are the actions that I can take and how can foster the team to do better on those metrics. So that's sorry, I focused on the growth part, but I see now that they are asking, they like to understand where they are excelling. So we can turn this the other way around. So the areas of the teams and the metrics of the team where they have contributed the most to see this positive impact.
Yeah.
But again, I would advise against looking at individual metrics.
metrics.
Yeah.
Okay. John, do you have a different opinion, or you want to add some thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree with what Mario was saying. I mean, that's again, with metrics, there's different metrics that you can take, but how you can help the team to improve, I think this is the best. So knowing which are the things that you can impact them and improve. So they are kind of related of things that he or she can continue growing and improving. If there's any other things, particular things that they are not related with how the team is working, that could be tricky at the same time, because maybe you can start fighting for different goals than others. But
however, I think this is my personal opinion about this thing. If I am part of the team, I know that we are working towards improving, let's say, our cycle time. Okay, how I have contributed to it would really matter to me. Like, I would want to see how much contribution have I made. If, let's say, we are trying to improve the code review time, and I'm one of those senior developers who look at the like PRs for review, I would definitely want to see how much I have contributed in improving that review time. The PRs that came to me, did I complete them in those benchmark time frames which were assigned for the team as goals? So, don't you think it can actually work in a very positive way for someone to have that clarity? I mean, I'm sorry to differ here, but what do you think?
I think it depends, right? Because maybe you are trying to improve. I mean, we are part of a whole, right? So if you are trying to improve the time, the PRs, and you improve that, but then you are deploying more bugs, what is the trade-off, right? Maybe. I mean, I think that we are part of a whole. So the part that we are not having the PRs, we have to improve how we are doing these reviews, but we are in a good shape on bugs. Then what I'm trying to say is, I'm okay with what you're saying, but you have to define also some guardrails. Guardrails. Like, if you are doing that thing, you cannot change these other ones. They have to stay how they are. So I can try to improve this, be more fast in the PRs while I'm doing my reviews, but they have to keep an eye on that. Okay, they are staying in the same situation than before. I'm improving. Now we are having better, faster PRs, but we are having problems with the deployment.
Makes sense.
Okay, let's have this balance.
Yeah, I think there is very few metrics that actually matter and that are close to having a direct impact for the customer, and those are all team metrics, right? Like how quickly can we ship working software in the customer's hands? That is. So so the thing is, if that is not working well, that's when you might want to say, let's dive deeper. Let's see what happens here, what happens here, what happens here, and then let's look transversally. Then maybe you see, oh, review time is high. But I don't think we should focus on review time, lowering review time, because that might not be your bottleneck. Maybe your review time compared to the time in progress and everything else it just makes sense, right? And the cycle time end to end is still very, very reasonable for the customer. So that lowering that further, I don't know, it might make people feel better, but it has no actual impact for the customer. And yeah, I had some other top point based on what John said, but it slipped my mind.
Oh, perfect. Great. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time, sharing your experience, talking about Monte Carlo. This was really, really an interesting deep dive into something that I always wanted to. And I'm happy that we did it together. There are a few topics that I had aligned for the session, but we'll take it in the next one. And thank you once again for taking out time today and sharing your thoughts. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you. We didn't even go into the pitfalls of Monte Carlo, so that is a whole topic on its own. I have many.
I'll make a note of that. We'll definitely cover that in the next session.
Yeah. Thank you, Kovid. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.